Hello and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I am your host, Ray Harkins, and this is episode number 9. We're trucking. We're almost at 10, double digits. Shit's for real. Anyways, we have an exciting announcement. We are now part of the Punk News Podcast Network. They have a few other shows like Wizard's Beard that covers metal and hardcore. And then they also have the Punk News podcast, which they do weekly, where they discuss a lot of the news that they have posted on their website. And for those of you that don't know what Punk News is, visit punknews.org. It's a great site as far as the daily comings and goings of what's been happening with bands. And it's cool because they don't get too, I guess for lack of a better term, tabloidy, where it's like, oh, this band farted in the recording studio. Because you obviously see a lot of news sites that do that, and that's fine because I read those as well. But Punk News definitely tries to consolidate and put out only the kind of most important news, so to speak. But in any event, we're really excited. We, as in I, am really excited because those dudes, they're great people, and I'm excited to be working with them. So hopefully, if you found out about this show through them, awesome. Keep listening. Yes, and for those of you that might just be joining the show, subscribe to the show through iTunes. That way you'll get every new episode when I post it on Tuesday mornings. And if you are already subscribed, do one more thing for me. Just rate the show. Because the more ratings we get, the more popular we are, the cooler that we look, and maybe potentially someone on iTunes is like, oh, hey, this show's cool. Let's feature it on the home page and make it insanely popular, because it's crazy, but that stuff happens in a matter of an episode. So anyways, I have been receiving a lot of great emails recently with people just kind of, either showing their support for the show or, like I've suggested in the past, people that are wanting me to interview certain people. So like future show suggestions and guests. Some of those have been coming in, and they've been really cool. It just shows that a lot of people that are interested in this type of content, like we think the same way, where it's like a lot of people have emailed me like, oh, hey, get this person and this person. I've been like, they're on my list. That's awesome. So we're on the same page of what we define as quote unquote interesting people. So it's nice. It's that sense of community, that camaraderie, that kinship, all that stuff that we obviously crave and like from independent music as a whole. My guest this week is Chris Bruni. He is the owner of Profound Lore Records, and some of you in the more hardcore community are like, what's Profound Lore Records? I have not heard of it. It's because it specializes in metal and different genres of extreme metal, from doom to black, and kind of all the shades thereof. I've been a fan of the label for a while, just kind of watching it rise to prominence. Ever since I was at Century Media Records, I kind of saw what Chris was doing and just really respected it, because it's a one-man operation, run like a lot of the great independent labels have been over the years. And he just manages a lot of it himself, or not a lot, all of it himself, and has been able to receive a lot of mainstream attention, most notably with his the working with that band Agalock, who was an absolutely incredible band for anybody who is a fan of progressive music that can be falling under the heavy category. He got to work with that band and release a record called Marrow of the Spirit. But anyways, I just thought he was I just thought the label was a really interesting thing. And I think that a lot of his ethics and framework in which he created the label definitely draw parallels to the punk and hardcore community, even though that's something that he may not have initially come from. And he definitely speaks about how the label started, and because I think when you are growing up with this type of music, everybody has an idea of like, oh, I want to do a record label. I mean, I did a record label. I put out 3 releases before I was like, oh, this shit's way too hard. And I also didn't hurt that I didn't have any more money to put into it. But everybody kind of wants to do that. And so it's really cool to see a person be able to be successful on some level at that and do it on his own terms, because, there are many times where other labels see something successful. When I say other labels, as in other larger labels, and then, either try to buy it out or help them. And, sometimes that help is good and benefits the label, and then other times it might get chewed up and spit out, so to speak. But regardless, I had a really interesting conversation with Chris. He is Canadian, so I apologize for I think in the first, this is the 9th episode, so we've had 2 Canadians so far. I love Canada, so you're going to have to deal with it. Anyways, I also wanted to kind of hit on 2 other things that I recently partook in that were fun and interesting. There's this comedian / podcaster named Doug Benson. He does this thing called the Benson Interruption in Los Angeles, where basically it's himself and usually 2 or 3 other comedians that watch a movie a la Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they basically take this movie, usually it's a bad movie, and then make fun of it throughout the show. So it was a really interesting experience, because it's this really small theater. There's maybe like 150, 200 people there. All these shows sell out well in advance. And so we saw the movie John Carter, which I actually was interested in seeing myself, just based on some sentimentality of it. But it was a funny experience, just because, the common conception of watching a movie is that you're supposed to watch it in silence, or, obviously not speak to anybody. So it was kind of interesting to have that sort of like stand-up comedy meets, the movie atmosphere, because, the people were chatty, even though, the movie was as bad as people said it was, and not just from it was basically just from like the most confusing movie I've seen recently. Like, I missed maybe the first 15 minutes of it and then walked into it, and I barely had any idea what was going on. I just knew that this guy was running around and trying to hurt people and whatever. Anyway, so that was an interesting experience. And then later on that evening, I saw Nazem, which is a Swedish grind extreme band. The vocalist passed away in those back in, I want to say 2008 or 2009, that terrible tsunami that hit Thailand. He actually passed away from that, and it was really sad, because, we as an independent culture sometimes feel bubbled from a lot of the outside world, and anytime a national or global, that's probably a better way to put it, a global tragedy happens, sometimes it doesn't really impact us from the independent culture standpoint. So then when something like that happens, it's like, oh wow, like obviously a lot of people are affected by this, and we as a community are also affected by it. But anyway, so they were doing one last tour of the States with a different vocalist, one of their friends, who, to just basically pay tribute to him and give people a chance to see the band that weren't able to in the first place. So it was really interesting, because I saw them in downtown Los Angeles at just a random hall that was definitely a place that you could have shows, but not on the regular, not a place like, Chain Reaction here in Southern California. So it was an interesting experience, because usually those type of shows draw people that might not typically go to those sort of venues, just because it's either out of the way or they're just not interested in it. So it was definitely an interesting night of independent culture, as it were. So I appreciated that. And on that tip, and on that note, here's the conversation that I had with Chris Bruni from Profound Lore. We caught up over the phone / Skype one afternoon from his home office in Mississauga, Ontario. And we kind of jumped into the conversation of, hipster black metal, just because his label has been pegged that occasionally. So here's our conversation. Hope you enjoy.
Not really from, it's from like indie rock, some of the hardcore, and some of those people who are into that,
Right.
post-metal and quote-unquote hipster black metal shit or whatever. That's the support. I get no support from, like, the actual metal scene, because a lot of the people involved in that scene are fucking clueless about anything in general, so...
Well, it seems that there's such a wide, such a huge difference from, like, I mean, because you look at Toronto, you look at, like, Hamilton, you look at all those areas, but then you drive 2 hours to, like, Buffalo, and it's
Yeah.
like the music scenes could obviously not be more vastly different, and it's just so weird. Like,
Yeah, totally.
and I distinctly remember, like, I know you know that band Alexis on Fire, like,
Yeah, yeah.
from
Oh, yeah.
St. Catharines, which is like literally half an hour from the border, and like could not be, you would not be fooled if you place that city anywhere in America, as far as like a person saying that, oh, this is in a different country.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I just remember it's like playing in Rochester with them, where it's like they did have a lot of people from Canada that came over to their show, but it was just like this such a wide, and it's like they would play Rochester to 200 people, and then they would play to St. Catharines, and obviously it's like thousands of people, and it's just
Right.
like it's so funny that huge, like, so
That
you
gap.
you yourself have seen that kind of gap where it's like people within the American metal scene that obviously would not understand the context of the Canadian metal scene, so to speak.
So I guess in a way, I see a lot of respect for it.
Hmm.
I think coming from, some people in America, but I'm not sure. It's be kind of hard for me to answer. I mean, I know, like, I've always associated Hamilton with a more
Sure.
hardcore scene, even like shallow North Dakota.
Yep, for sure.
I believe from Hamilton, and again, that's the home base of Goodfella Records was based out of. So yeah, I've always seen Hamilton as more of a hardcore
Hmm.
kind of scene. So I've always associated Hamilton with that. Um,
So,
but Toronto's kind of, it has its own different segments.
right, right.
Even today, like, you got the metal crowd. You have, like, the indie crowd that filters into, cool metal, underground metal music and hardcore.
Right.
So I guess that's where kind of, like, I guess, the people who appreciate what I do
Sure.
from Toronto, like, kind of dwell out of.
Uh-huh.
Whereas, like, there's a lot of the metal scene in Toronto, they like to they support a lot of metal on big labels, like, Nuclear Blast Metal, Century Media Metal,
Sure.
stuff like that. So it's it's a mix. It's a mix.
Yeah, so like where did you kind of, start cutting your teeth into the musical world, and kind of what was your
Like
gateway, and yeah,
the
exactly.
gateway. Yeah, well, I have I've always been around older people, like my cousins, even people like older people at school who are always into music. Especially, I guess it started with my cousins.
Hmm.
My cousins were they were huge they're huge Rush fans, so I'd be exposed to that every time I go visit them up north. Bands like Rush, Van Halen, even pop music like Duran as well too.
Hmm.
So it was just through them discovering music in general, and being kind of exposed to it through bands like that.
Were
And
you
then
were you an only child, or did you have brothers or sisters?
I have a younger sister.
Oh, okay, yeah, because usually it's like you do find the older sibling sort
The
of.
older sibling, yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't have that, but like I would go up north where my cousins lived. And it's where my father's side of the family is based of. It's about so we'd go up and generally hang out. They'd have their record collection. And we'd just they'd play music all the time, and that's how I would discover these bands. And then we had the Much Music, the television
Sure.
the video television show. So I'd watch that as a kid quite a bit, and then they'd have like the heavy metal hour,
Yeah, I was gonna say
power
because
hour.
they didn't, because obviously here in the States they had Headbangers Ball. Like, did they have
Right.
that was something that was had up on Much Music as well?
We didn't have Headbangers Ball. We had the Power Hour.
Okay.
Something, and it was called the Power Hour, and then it was like, if I can remember, it was like once a week for an hour, and then it was like then they did it like Monday to Thursday, half an hour each day. I forget, like they did it in certain cycles, but when you're a kid and we'd watch Much Music, and even, with my cousins and I, we'd see videos by like Iron Maiden, Ozzy Osbourne, the Bark at the Moon video, and Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast video, Motley Crue's Too Young to Fall in Love video. Those are like the first impressions I've got of like heavy music that really made an impression, seeing the actual music videos. And again, like when I was 8 years old or whatever, there were older kids at school. Like I'd have like a babysitter or someone who would walk me to school, and their friends would be into stuff like heavy music as well too. So I was kind of exposed to that at a young age. That it made an impression pretty easily at that young age. So just by watching the videos and being around older people, I remember there was an older guy in elementary school. Like I was about like in the second grade, and this older guy, his name was Rich, and I'll never forget this guy. He had the prototypical 80s metal look. He'd give me like Motley Crue pictures from magazines and all that, and I said he used to just give them to me. He's like, here, check this out here, and he used to give this stuff to me, and I kind of put them up on my wall or whatever in my room, and I was about like 8 years old at the time.
Wow.
So that's how it kind of started, and it just, I guess, snowballed from there.
Oh, I
was also listening to the typical pop music and rock music,
right,
too. But
that's interesting. I find it interesting that you had so many different inputs in regards to that music, and it seems like you might have been like, after you were exposed to a little bit, were you just like insanely curious, and basically anybody that was kind of like older than you started to be able to siphon off bits of information from them? Because it sounds like you had more than one person coming in.
Yeah, kind of in a way. And then like people who were in my class, we kind of feed off each other as well too, because there were also people I grew up with who were really into music. A friend of mine was really into music because his older brother had an older brother who exposed him to the Beatles, for example.
Sure.
So we had, we'd feed off even, people in class, classmates as well too.
Yeah. So were you?
But it wasn't just metal. It was like everything.
Right.
Sometimes we weren't allowed to, sometimes we were kind of self-conscious about, when you're a small kid, you're self-conscious about some of the, you listen to metal, and it's like, oh, maybe they won't, you'd be kind of scared that they wouldn't like you because you like this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can't.
Scary music. So you were conscious about that. And even when I was like a teenager, I mean, when I was listening to like the early Deicide Morbid Angel stuff, like I'd even have cousins who'd be like, who try to deter me from listening to that, saying, "Oh, if I buy these bands that support a satanic message, you are supporting their cause."
Right.
You're supporting their quote-unquote satanic cause, and et cetera, et cetera. And, that obviously, because they were family members, I had a few cousins closer to my age kind of instill that in me. And at the time, I was just kind of like, still a teenager, and I was kind of like, it somehow rubs off on you a little bit.
Of course.
You make yourself a bit conscious. Then a couple of years later, I'm like, you think to yourself, why the fuck was I even listening to that? I feel like a total idiot and a fool,
right?
For even trying to attempt to fall and kind of listen to them and try to kind of go toward their way.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So this is like the different phases of listening to this music and being impressionable by the people who surround you. It's been interesting when you think about it. So
yeah, that's interesting. Like, so were you raised like a certain type of faith, and like was that sort of the the family kind of being like leaning on your cousins to be like, oh man, like they need to get Chris out of this, otherwise he's going to go down.
No, actually, my parents have always been. They've never questioned any of the music I release. I mean, I've listened to growing up.
Sure.
Never. I had Motley Crue shirts, Shout Out the Devil shirts as a little kid, and my parents had never questioned that.
That's cool.
which is kind of weird. Yeah,
Right.
when I think about it, and because my father, he's always been a Catholic. He goes to church regularly, but he doesn't. My parents have never questioned. I mean, especially in high school when I started listening to death metal. I mean,
Right.
you were to come to my house. That's all you'd be hearing out of my room. And you can obviously hear it all over the house.
Sure.
And you're not. So it's they've never been like, what is this?
Interesting.
They've never questioned that.
Because yeah, you typically, I mean, that's like atypical of a person that enters the sort of metal world, because obviously, like everything that a teenager gets into, you do it like 150%. So obviously,
Yeah.
you're like
I didn't listen to this, extreme metal or death metal to rebel against anyone.
right, right,
I just really liked it. I found it intriguing, and it was just kind of like, I've always, I guess, been unconsciously wanting to push myself to hear music, like you get into, Metallica, Slayer, and you want to push it even further. So you want to see like, okay, well, how much more can how much can my musical threshold go from here?
sure,
So I was just intrigued by it. Has nothing to do with rebellion or that I wanted to stick out.
right,
It has nothing to do with that. I mean, as a kid, but
yeah, because
it's weird. It's weird because now what I do with the record label, with the releases I do, I actually have more of a rebellion kind of attitude towards certain things. But
such as like the type of music that you would maybe release, or
just the stuff like the stuff I release is it's really personal, and I see it as, I don't want to see it as like a, I see it in a way, in a little bit. It's a rebellion against a lot of bad metal coming out against.
Oh, sure.
The so-called music industry system on how things should be run, on how things should be, on how things should be played upon to help a label grow. And
right.
I don't know. It's just it's I'm kind of going against the grain of a lot of things. So consciously today, yeah, I guess you could say that's part of the process on how I run the label.
Sure.
Well, yeah. When I release something like, a death metal album, I want this to be, this kind of death metal is what real death metal should be like, not this other crap that's being considered death metal. That's not death metal. So in a way, it's kind of like a statement against a lot of this stuff that's false, so to speak.
Right. Hey, you're catching up for any sort of rebellion you were supposed to do as your teenage years. Now, basically, the music industry is your parent, and you're being like, no, I'm going to do this.
I guess you could see it in that way. There's I have some sort of repression in me that, I guess. I mean, when I was in high school and all that, it's not like I was a loner or anything. I mean, I had a lot of, people might have thought I was a bit weird, but I had friends. I hung out with people.
Sure.
I wasn't, I wasn't like a total loner. I mean, it might have been hard to get laid or to get a date with girls, but I mean, I'm right. I mean, obviously it paid off because doing this is almost like, I guess you could say it's living the dream, right?
Right.
Whereas I know no one in high school that I've grown up with who's actually living a dream.
Right.
There's a lot of people I grew up with in high school that, they've always wanted to be musicians. I knew a lot of people who always wanted to pursue music, like in bands and whatnot. And, obviously it doesn't pan out. They're working, regular jobs. A lot of them, most of them are. And I'm sure a lot of these jobs, some of them have good paying jobs as well too. But, they're all miserable.
Right.
In a way, they have their legacy with their, they get married, they have kids, they have their legacy.
Sure.
In place. I mean, so I guess doing what I do is my legacy because I'm not married and I don't have kids. So that's the path, I guess, that was given to me.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's the path that you've obviously decided to kind of, pursue. So when you were, as you were kind of going through high school and, did you always have aspirations to be like, yo, I really need to do something with the music industry. This is kind of what I want to end up being. And like, did you go to college and stuff?
Yeah, no, I went to university and I did post-grad work. But, when I was in high school, I always, you read zines and magazines and reviews of stuff. I've always wanted to, I guess get involved in a way, not really play in a band because I've never played guitar. I mean, I'm musically trained, but I've never really aspired to play in a band for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've never. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I always thought it'd be cool, because to play in a band because it's just some friends of mine had. There was a group in high school. There was a group of people I knew and friends that that kind of hung out in quote unquote music circles. So they'd play music with each other. They'd be in the battle of the bands, and you'd always think, that'd be cool to get involved. But I at the same time I didn't. Again, because I can't play guitar. I could never play guitar or drums or let alone sing. So I was never really involved in that aspect. But in a way, it was always, I guess, you always thought it'd be cool to get involved, but you never really knew how.
Okay, yeah. Well, if you don't play in a band, it's not readily apparent that like, oh, I need to end up being in the music industry because this is the way that it should be. Yeah,
but we in high school, you don't think of it as the actual music industry. You just want to be around cool music, right? So, I mean, obviously, some people thought it was a bit weird that I listened to death metal and whatnot in high school, and there was only no one else really did.
Right.
Maybe 2 other people did, if that. But it's a small group, but
yeah. So as you started to kind of go, well, what did you study in university?
I did undergrad I went to film school for undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
That was, initially, that's what I wanted to get involved in, and then years later, I did postgrad in public relations and communications.
Yeah, because
so I finished that about maybe 5 years ago.
Okay.
6 years ago or something like that. I think it's 5 years ago or something like that. So
because you were doing prior to the label, you were doing like PR work and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah. But I always ask myself because I mean the PR program I was involved in was a pretty prestigious program. It was recognized in North America, and sometimes I ask myself the way I run the label, would I be running it any differently if I never took the program? That's something I can't really. It's kind of hard to answer. Right. I do on occasion ask myself that because I was really serious about getting in public relations and communications, not within the music industry. Maybe combining it with my film school stuff,
right? But
just work in that actual industry, in an agent, in a PR agency or a communications company. But I didn't think, oh, I'm going to involve music in this.
So did you have aspirations to move to either New York or LA just because that's obviously the hotbeds in regards to that field?
None whatsoever. No, I wasn't really. Yeah, I wasn't. I don't think location's not much of an issue. Where I live now, it's pretty remote, so it's not. It's nowhere near an actual city. I mean, the main city that that I live in, it's a pretty well-known technological hub. I mean, this is where the BlackBerry is based. The BlackBerry was invented here.
Sure.
We have a Google office here. We're getting a Facebook office here. So, but I think location-wise, it's not really. If I want to go somewhere to see something, I'll travel. I don't mind traveling.
Right.
Somewhere, but it's.
So as you were going through school, you had no desire to be all right, I want to pick up stake and move somewhere, move to the States for a little bit or whatever. That was just never.
No, I've never had that. Visiting, yeah, to travel there as much as I could, yes, of course.
Sure.
But not really living there.
So basically you're saying you hate America. I understand. It's okay.
No,
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. You're no, don't put words in my mouth.
I love visiting. I love visiting there because, I know people in certain cities and, I don't hang out. I'm miserable here where I am. So, let alone I'm excited, when I'm even at the airport, waiting to get on a plane to LA or New York or whatever.
Sure.
And get me the hell out of here.
Sure, sure.
So yeah, I love hanging out in those cities,
So
visiting.
do you just kind of like the sort of, you know, slower paced lifestyle, remoteness aspect of it? Is that kind of
I
what
like
keeps you
it
there?
because it's really peaceful where I live right now, and
Got it.
so it's where I'm living now. I got a circle of friends I hang out with, but they're not metal people by all means, which is fine by me.
Right.
It's great.
Well, yeah, you got to you can't consume it 24/7 and not be a crazy person.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's good here. I mean,
It suits you.
it suits me. Like I said, it's a quiet, remote area, and
Sure. And then you're busy making all of this terrible noise there.
yeah, I know. So it's kind of, I think it's weird because when Ken Mode won that Juno Award,
Of course.
word got around that a local label, a band, a band from a local label won a Juno.
Right.
Local label won a Juno. So that's kind of cool that word's getting around. Like the lady at the post office today, the post office I go to,
Uh-huh.
she's like, "Oh my God, I heard you won a Juno," and I'm like, and I never really bragged about it there, but I guess she heard it on the radio or saw it.
Sure.
She saw the name, Profound Law Records, and I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and
the interesting thing I mean, speaking about your geographical location,
yeah,
the thing that I've always admired about Canada, and I mean most other developed nations besides America, is the fact that they actually do care about the arts, such as like your how Canada has the factor grants, and
yeah,
there's a certain amount, like you were referencing Much Music earlier. There's obviously a certain amount of Canadian artists that need to be represented on there.
yeah.
Has Profound Lore found any sort of recognition based off that fact? And have you ever looked into support from the Canadian government or stuff?
I know Jesse of Ken Mode always kind of suggests that I look into stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like, he's all, because he's Ken Mode have gotten a lot of grants, government grants themselves.
Yeah.
And they've been really successful at it too. But I've never really looked into it. I don't think I've really needed it. I mean,
well, that's good.
I don't know how recognized I am in Canada in general because my sales are crap.
Right.
My distribution here is crap. It's
right.
Like, just give me a break. It's almost a joke.
Right.
The Agalock album did well.
Mm-hmm.
That's an exception, though. But it's a tough market. I mean, I have a distributor, but they can only do, I guess they can only do so much. So
sure.
I've always consciously wanted to get some sort of recognition. I think with Ken Mode winning Juno, it helped. It helped a bit because it was literally the first time the Junos had ever had a metal hard music album award.
Right. Yeah, I was shocked too.
Yeah, and it's awesome. They actually gave it to a band who's actually really talented.
Right.
Probably one of the hardest working bands in heavy music today, and not some garbage like Kitty or
yeah.
I don't know, it's weird. Protest the Hero weren't even nominated. It was kind of like
that is strange.
That's strange, yeah, and they sell tons of albums.
Right,
It's
right.
It's kind of weird, but it was cool that they got a cool underground, hardworking, talented band. Got this award. And
sure.
So hopefully it brings recognition in a way.
Right. So did you actually get a statue as well?
I'm waiting for mine,
Oh,
actually.
nice. Personalized and everything?
Well, I think Ken Mode's name's on there. I'm not sure if the label name is on there as well too.
Sure.
I'll have to see. I'll have to see. I don't know. I mean, when Ken Mode won it, they had to give the statue back.
Right.
And they're gonna get the 3 members are gonna get their own complimentary statues.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm literally waiting for it. So.
Well, yeah. Then if the label falls on hard times for a few months and cash flow is a problem, you can obviously just put that on eBay.
Yeah, I could put that on eBay. I could put a few Agalock albums on eBay.
Exactly. Put some test presses up there. You're done.
Oh, yeah.
Something I've noticed in some of the other interviews that you've done, You've always kind of mentioned yourself being, well, you didn't actually use these words. This is definitely me just placing this on you, but
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but you definitely, you calculate your growth. And part of that calculation, I think, is the fact that you yourself are a control freak in a way, where it's like, I like to have this much involvement in the label. I don't really like to farm out too much besides your
Right.
obvious like manufacturing. Like you yourself are not going to own a manufacturing plant. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, like is that kind of part and parcel? Like does that weigh in your mind where it's just like you really have to think about things before you want to make a next quote unquote next step with the label?
In a way, yeah. I mean, like I said, I work with Josh when it comes to publicity and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's kind of like I mean, it's always good to have the extra help, but when I don't need it, I don't really need it. So I mean, I guess it all depends. Um, I don't know. It's kind of yeah. I'd like to have as much control as possible
Sure.
on most things, but it's always good to have another set of eyes. Um,
Sure. So you're
and
you're not opposed to obviously people helping you. It's just it needs to make sense internally
it
for
needs to
you.
make sense. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I don't mind people keeping an eye out for me, or having a second. Oh, a second. I don't mind having second opinions. Of course, I think that's an essential thing to have a
Sure.
second opinion on a lot of things. Or have people to go to advice to, and whatnot. It's always good to have stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's always a fine line between all that stuff, anyways. So
And so
um,
and kind of with that, like, obviously the label is getting more attention in regards to, obviously a lot of the plugs that you were mentioning where it's like Junos and, everybody obviously always talks to you about your relationship with Scion and everyone speaks about the fact
yeah,
that NPR gives a shit about what you're doing. Um,
yeah. Now it's like, yeah,
and you're like, yo, I've been doing this for a few years. Thanks for paying attention now. I'm just kidding.
no, I mean the Scion. Yeah, I mean I was with the Scion thing since the beginning,
Right.
because Adam Shore has always been aware of. He's been a fan of the stuff I've done for a pretty long time. So he's always been a supporter, and it's just grown from there. The NPR thing, I'm not sure. Some people have said I started the whole NPR metal trend, and now every metal label is trying to get their stuff on NPR.
Well, of course.
Yeah, but
Well, once
it's cool. I don't know. I don't know if there was the first time I saw something on NPR of mine was when I think something from the second Krallis album was posted
hmm
on like some sort of year-end thing,
Sure.
and everyone's free. I was like, oh my god, Krallis on NPR, and I'm like, oh cool, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And
You're like, I'll take
but
that.
I don't know how much metal was actually they covered prior to that. I'm not
Right.
so I'm not exactly sure, but
Yeah.
according to a lot of people, that was like the first time like something like some extreme metal was actually mentioned on NPR.
Sure. And
So
so,
now,
go
you
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just,
No, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, basically, you seem like an open-minded enough individual, especially with the type of music that you release and just basically how you present yourself and the label out there, that this attention obviously does not bother you, where a lot of other people, mostly just from the fan perspective of things, and obviously the whole idea of selling out and keeping things true and all that bullshit.
Yeah,
Um, so this obviously doesn't bother you. Like you've made whatever quote unquote peace you have in your own mind, where it's just like I just want the most amount of people to listen to this music, or there are other goals that you kind of have in regards to just exposing the stuff that you do on the label?
yeah, I do want as many people to listen to this, to listen to this as much, to listen to this stuff as much as possible. The growth,
It doesn't need to be an exclusive club.
no, I don't, not really. I think something everyone's welcome to. I mean, I like certain things when certain things I release. If it's like I kind of if you talk about a genre like death metal
hmm
or something, I like at least like the people to understand what real death metal should be. So I feel like it's my, I guess, prerogative or mission to kind of school them on, this is the death metal you should be listening to.
Got it.
Because it's the real shit. So you kind of want people to understand as well too. And I think these people are open to understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's just sometimes I act in a way that, if I release like something black metal related, that this is for real black metal. I guess a real black metal purist.
Sure.
So at the same time, I do have that kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm. The thought goes through your head.
Yeah, it does. And when something's like real and genuine, I stress it. Yeah, this is real and what I think is real and genuine within said genre. Not not what this other band is doing, or not what these other
trends are following.
Trends or labels or whatever are doing. So it's a bit of both, I guess.
Sure.
But there's other. I'm not gonna. It's not like. It's like I'm an elitist, but at the same time I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of weird in that way.
You're maybe a calculated elitist.
I guess.
Or you it seems like you put thought into it, where it's like you obviously aren't following the musical trends to find out what's going to be hip in the next year or two. You kind of release what you want based on your gut feeling towards the music, and you obviously make it as widely available as you can within the comforts of your own level. Obviously.
I know. There's some stuff I release that can only go so far with certain people.
Sure.
You kind of expect that. So.
Right.
But I mean, when you take a band like Paul Bearer, for example, this band should be heard by everybody.
Yes, they should.
Yeah, they should. So why should they be limited to just a doom metal?
Right.
Why should they just tour with, these really heavy? Why should they just be limited to playing in front of a doom metal audience?
Right.
This is a band that could, that can cross over, with people that listen to, I don't know, Mastodon,
mm-hmm.
Baroness.
Sure.
There's no reason why these people shouldn't get exposed to Paul Bearer.
Right.
So, or Yob opening up for Tool.
You'll take it.
I'll take it. Yeah. Why? It's amazing. Why not?
Right. And kind of with that, like the way that the label is going as of late, you've always kind of made it clear that you do run a professional operation. You do kind of work with contracts and stuff like that. What things have made you, like, as you've kind of been forced to do things that maybe initially you didn't have plans to do so? What concessions have you made where it's like, all right, I have to do this because this is just either the way the business is or whatever. What concessions have you made that you're like, man, that's a bummer, but I just kind of have to do it?
Yeah, stuff like basic contracts are done when you put money or an investment into it.
Right.
It's still pretty loose in a way, but you got to sometimes follow protocol to, I guess,
protect your investment in a way.
Protect it in a way, and just follow a certain procedure. Just so things are run. There's when things run, and there's a certain procedure around certain things. There's more of an understanding between both parties.
Of course.
So and you want that, right? So I guess that's really the reason why. Why I'll do stuff like that, just so there's a trust factor involved, but there's also, there's some extra padding to it.
Sure.
So there's a mutual understanding between both parties, what they can expect from one another. So that's really the reason why stuff like that gets drafted.
Right. Has there been anything else that you've had to kind of step out of your comfort zone to do just because, it is sort of the protocol that you're talking about?
Uh, well, like I'm not really the biggest fan of advertising,
Okay.
but I do it. I mean, I advertise pretty much in every issue of Decibel magazine,
Hmm.
and it makes sense,
Sure.
in a way. But yeah, I'm not really. I've never. I remember. I remember when the label was still growing, right? I used to have, there was a person who ran one label. That person and label will not be mentioned,
No problem.
but I used to see him, I used to contact him just for advice because I was close to him and I knew him since the label started out of his apartment. And I remember asking him for advice, and he's like, "Well, I'm, about distribution and everything." And he'd always tell me, if you're gonna grow your label, you have to spend, this amount, thousands of dollars in marketing per release, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, okay, okay. I was kind of felt, not thrown off, but it was just kind of like, okay, so that's what I got to do,
Right.
whatever. But I've never the way the label has grown has not been because I've gone on marketing campaigns or thrown all this money into like these big advertising campaigns to build awareness. I mean, that's not really the reason how the label grew. Um,
Sure.
it's just been a slow, culminating effect that's kind of just grown naturally, and that's the way that's the way it should. It shouldn't have to be forced. Nothing was forced
Sure. Yeah,
with the label.
you don't have to throw a bunch of money at something. I mean, that may get results quicker, but those results might not be at the end of the day what you're looking for.
Exactly. So it's not, I just want things to grow naturally.
Yeah. Um,
Not, I don't want things to, I don't want to, I don't want to do something contrived or forced just to kind of help bring awareness to the label, like doing big ad campaigns or,
sure.
I don't know, I don't feel like, I mean, every year when I do, when I calculate all my, when I prepare for my taxes and everything, like, every year it's always like the advertising, but, the advertising, what I spend on advertising kind of grows.
Sure.
Usually grows year by year, but, I've been open to it, but, I don't want anything to be forced with the label. I just want everything to come naturally. And it's like, the reason why I work with a band like Agalock or Yob is not because, okay, this is the band I need to kind of help take the label to the next level.
Hmm.
I mean, it naturally will happen, but it's just that I'm friends with these guys, and it's a natural thing that I work with these bands.
Yeah, so I find that, I mean, that's an interesting point because, you know, labels, they obviously employ A&R people. I was an A&R person at Century Media, and I was
Right.
responsible. I mean, a lot of it was based on the fact that I did have pre-existing relationships with people, and there was a level of trust there.
Yeah.
And so, but you yourself are doing it all. Do you find yourself like having to do sort of that, A&R game where you have to like chase a band and kind of, prove Profound Lore's worth, or do you kind of rely on like, hey, I'd love to work with you. If if you want to talk, like I'm here and I'm available, but I'm not gonna, fly
It's
out,
it's it's
fly out to the.
mostly
Go ahead.
it's mostly been like that, like you were just explaining.
Hmm.
Like there's maybe been, I think, one band where I really pursued
Okay.
in a way, just because the guy in the band's a good friend of mine,
Hmm.
and I'm a big fan of the band. They ended up signing to Relapse ultimately.
You're like, damn, my work just didn't pay off.
Well, but it wasn't work though. It was just like, I mean, the guy in the band's a really good friend of mine, and we always talk and all that, and we just came up with a thing. Yeah, I want to do your next album, and then he'd be like, well, if Metal Blade come with me with a lot of money, I'm gonna go with them, and I'm like, that's totally cool.
Got it.
And then the Relapse came into the picture because I guess they're trying to branch out They want to see if they can get like the satanic death metal crowd. They're trying to branch out to that crowd with this band. So, it's cool. It's not like I'm crushed or anything.
Right. It's not like
Don't get me wrong.
It's not like you're, posting on your Tumblr saying "I hate Relapse" or the worst label of all time.
No, I love the Relapse guy. I love the Relapse guys. I think they're one of the best, heavy music labels today.
Yeah.
But it's good. Okay, if you want to go with Relapse, yeah, it's totally cool with me.
Sure.
Even that's fine. I mean, I got other things up my sleeve anyways, so.
Right.
I'm not too worried. I'm still occupied, and
sure.
Even even Hooded Menace went to Relapse, and everyone's like, "Oh, Relapse poached Hooded Menace from you," and I'm like, "Well, not really. I mean, I did the one album with them. That was cool with me. If they want to move on, Relapse, that's fine. I didn't really fight to keep them on."
Here's my big...
You want to go to Relapse? That's fine. I mean,
right.
Dude, this year I'm releasing. I got some really pretty epic, monolithic, death doom I'm releasing this year, so I'm not worried anyways.
Right. You're like, I already have.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're like, I have a lot of work. It'd be great if we were to work together again, but you got to do what you have to do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, yeah, by all means, go ahead. Obviously, There's some bands I have more of a personal connection with.
Right.
In a way. So I mean, every band is a different level, but
sure.
Yeah, it's just like everything's just, again, back to that whole natural process of things working themselves out. I mean, I don't go out of my way to really chase a band down. I mean, there have been times where I've talked to the band, but I usually leave it in their hands, and then they'll end up going with another label because that label has really been pursuing them.
Right.
Sometimes I'll be like, well, I think I might have gotten them if I pursued them more consistently. But, I just put the feelers out there, we talk, and then leave it up to them. So, I mean, there's some bands, obviously, that I really, want to work with, and I'll go that little extra effort to make it happen. But it's very, it's not really, it's not all the time. It's like the odd time that, that comes up. It's not like all the time I gotta chase a band down and try to cock block another label.
Right.
No, it's not really like that. Like with Agalock, I mean, with a band like Agalock, that was in the works for years. I mean, that was, that was going to happen regardless when they left from The End Records. And it was funny when Agalock announced when they severed their ties with their former label, The End Records, everyone was exploding on the forums. Which label are they going to work with next? So, and it was kind of funny reading that because we already knew.
Right. You're like, I know.
It's like it's already said. So it's just and even Yob, it was that was kind of like a natural thing. How that all came together. Even Yakuza, again, it was all, everything just kind of snowballed from initial conversations you have with these musicians.
Sure. And then now you've established. I mean, now Profound Lore's established where if people want to work with you, they obviously know kind of where to reach you, and your reputation hopefully will precede you. That they'll obviously want to work with you.
That's all you can hope. I can hope for.
Right.
In a way, everything now is just like referrals from other people, other bands, friends I know.
Sure.
Who are in other bands and people I trust.
Right.
So that's essentially usually how it works. And obviously, I have no problem with working with a new band. If I really like them, I want to work with them, right?
Right.
So some really new bands will have buzz, from their demo.
Sure.
Again, Paul Bear, that. So, I definitely do not oppose working with new bands at all. Because I know there's some labels out there who will not work with new bands at all. Because they know
Yeah, it's a risk in a way.
it'd be a risk for them. They can't really afford to put their resources in these bands that haven't really played live much, or have maybe one album, self-released album out or demo. So,
Sure.
but for me, it's never been a problem to do that. It's awesome to work with an unknown band and bring awareness to them.
Definitely.
As best you can. Yeah, it's a great feeling. That's probably one of the most fulfilling feelings you can have, or accomplishments.
Sure.
To do stuff like that.
Yeah, give them a platform to express themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Where okay, say obviously in a year, Profound Lore continues to expand and do what you guys are doing and release. Or when I say you guys, I mean you. do what you do. I'm sure at some point there's obviously been labels sniffing around you and obviously sniffing around your bands and kind of throwing proposals your direction as far as like, oh, maybe if we buy out 49% of your company and all that type of stuff.
No.
How have you handled, those sort of interesting offers that have come across your table where it's like, on one hand, it's exciting because people are showing an interest in what you're doing, but on the other hand, it's obviously like, this is kind of weird. I don't know how I should handle this or how I should respond or whatever,
You mean other labels trying to buy a stake?
Yeah, like either buy a stake or like offer, like distribution deal, whatever. Like there's obviously a million different
I've never
scenarios.
really had that. Like, I think I've actually had Victory Records send me an email about distribution out of all labels. That seems kind of weird. I mean, I've had bigger distributors, take an interest in me, which is cool. I mean,
Sure.
It's just there has to be a level of comfortability, or what's the word? I got to be comfortable.
Right.
With the people I work with and who I deal with, and I'm like today, especially today, I'm very evasive and very, very careful on who I work with.
Sure. You feel like their reputation needs to precede them before.
I mean, I've had interest from one of the big distributors over here to that they want to distribute me, but I don't know if that could benefit me.
Sure.
There's certain factors that I have to take into account that may not benefit me. Or the certain sacrifices I have to make.
Sure.
And my pocketbook will get hit.
Right.
Quite a bit. But I've seen there hasn't been any like labels actually trying to buy a stake, or because I'm not there's obviously been I'm not going to go under get distribution under a bigger label. I think that'd be kind of pointless. And those things never work out anyways. Like I've seen other labels kind of go under the wing of a bigger label.
Sure.
And dude, no, it doesn't work out in the long run.
There's one out of like every 15 or 20 that do work, but most of them fail. Yes.
Yeah, and then the ones that do work, they don't last more than 2 years.
Sure.
I don't know, they'll work for like a couple of years, but I've seen some labels just try it out, which is fine, but I've never really had that desire. Like I always want to do it myself. Again, back to the control thing. I want to do it myself. I want to work hard myself, build it up myself without the help of a bigger label. I mean, I've inquired. Don't get me wrong. I've inquired. Like when the label was first starting out, I did inquire about stuff like that.
Sure.
At the same time, I don't think they were really interested in what I was doing.
Right.
I guess they underestimated what I would end up becoming.
Sure.
I think I get that sense a lot. Like, and I'm sure a lot of labels are kind of keeping an eye on what I'm doing or trying to predict my next move. I've been told from some sources that certain labels that will not be named are keeping a close eye on me, and they're trying to predict my next move.
You're the tastemaker.
Yeah, and then these labels are they're trying to figure out how I do this.
Right.
I mean, I'm one guy. You're like what, 5, 10 guys?
Right.
That's kind of interesting. But I'm flattered. Obviously I'm flattered. Don't get me wrong.
It's flattering.
flattering.
It's flattering and funny at the same time.
It's cool, and even like but it's cool because even I remember. So I do get that. From what I've recently heard, actually from what Josh actually gave me a heads up on.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, these guys are on your tail, so to speak. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'm I'm not. I don't feel threatened or anything.
Right.
You always,
right.
you always want to have something up your sleeve, but
Mm-hmm.
it's cool when you get word that Brian Flagel is a fan of what you do.
Of course.
So stuff like that, it's like holy shit, you feel flattered. I think because one of the bands I work with, I think they were Metal Blade was initially interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna name who. Just,
Sure.
But obviously I was totally cool. I was like, that's awesome. Sign with them if it's a good deal. Work it out. That'd be so cool. It's, you guys deserve it. And Metal Blade, or like, what if that's hopefully that's totally cool with you. We don't want to step on your toes. You really respect what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that was kind of cool. That kind of experience, that
feedback that you get from people.
That feedback that I got, that Metal Blade were interested in a band I released and whatnot.
So would you, with all that being said, would you ever entertain an offer if a label were to come in and be like, hey, we'll buy a percentage of the company, you can retain the creative control, and essentially we would just kind of be business advisors and that type of stuff? Or
no, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm not interested. I mean, no, it just wouldn't make me comfortable.
Sure.
In a way. So I like the way it is now. I have to, as long as I'm comfortable and I'm comfortable in dealing with the people, the very few people I deal with, because I'm very, you become more selective as the longer I do this, the more selective I've become with the people.
Yeah, who you let into the circle, so to speak.
Who I let into the circle, exactly, and that's very. It's a pretty tight knit circle, but there's some people you want to keep at a distance as well too.
Of course.
So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting how things are panning out in that way. The more attention you get, the more your peers in the industry are kind of like, okay, we gotta, gotta wake up here. We're gonna see how
can we model ourselves after Profound Lore, except on a bigger scale?
And then, for me, there's no big secret. It's not like I mapped everything out into this like grand design. It's just things just happen. It's a natural process on how this thing grew.
Yeah.
There's no secret. There's no.
Yeah, you're not reading a book that they're not reading.
No, exactly. Exactly.
You're not reading how to run a independent metal label 101.
Yeah, or how to run an independent metal label for dummies or anything. There's none of that. I don't know. I can't explain it. There's no there's a inherent built aesthetic.
Right. Or if that isn't a book that exists, you should probably write it.
Yeah. Well.
That's your retirement plan.
Yeah, but I wouldn't know how to write it because it's hard to explain in itself.
Yeah, it's a 3-page manual where 1, it just happens. 2, don't spend a ton of money, and 3, find good bands.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
simple.
Everyone who runs small and even a small independent label. They know, these people know what they want. They're, sometimes our tastes cross-pollinate, aesthetically as well, too. So
So with, sort of in conclusion with all of that, so basically the level that you're at right now with the label is something that you're going to be comfortable with for this foreseeable future.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm not looking, here's the deal, I'm not looking to consciously become the next big label.
Mm-hmm.
Some labels out there they're trying to find ways to, this industry, it's teetering on its axis. It's in contemplation. There's a lot of uncertainty involved, but I'm just, I got to be aware of stuff like that, but I'm not consciously trying to make this the next big label. I'm just gonna continue doing my thing and doing, releasing stuff I really can connect and resonate with.
Sure.
I'm not desperate.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
I'm not.
that's important.
Yeah, I'm not looking to make this. I'm not looking to take the next big step. If that step comes, it's gonna come, and I'm gonna take it naturally as I should.
Right.
But
You're not going to hire a 5-person staff in 3 weeks and then all of a sudden be like, hey, where did all my money go?
yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just like I said, I do everything myself. It'd be, it's always nice to have help, especially with the grunt work.
Right.
And stuff like that, because I got to unload the trucks, I got to organize, a lot of the physical stuff. I got to
It's so glamorous.
It takes its toll, and as much as I like to see my distributor put in an order for me, I got to be like, oh fuck, I got to put this together. Got to drive to the storage unit, put these boxes. Man, it does take its toll, and it's just kind of like it kind of drains you a bit.
Of course.
So in a way, you should be excited that they take more product, but at the same time, it's like,
You're like, dude, please don't order 400 more units of the Pallbearer CD. Please don't.
Yeah, exactly. As much as I want them to.
Right.
But that's amazing if they do. I get excited. It's like, okay, I gotta.
But then the logistics come into play, and it's like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. I mean, it's a bummer just the physicalness of it, like you're saying.
Yeah, well, I gotta drive to the storage unit. And
it's the process.
Pick up the boxes, pack them.
Sure.
And so, I mean, there's I could always use help like that, and. It's just really hard finding office space where I am.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked in a few places, and it's just they weren't really ideal.
Yeah.
In a way. So that's why I guess I work out at home, because
sure.
It's nice. But I haven't really found the proper, when it comes to stuff like office space. There hasn't been one.
Right.
It's hard to find where I live in the area, and the stuff I've looked at, it's not really been ideal.
Sure.
So
something for you to eventually transition into. It just it didn't work out.
In a way, if it happens, it happens. If I move to a bigger place, that I can afford, that'd be good.
Right. Well, basically, once Jay-Z shows an interest in independent music, and then obviously offers to buy Profound Lore for $7 million, then you can probably find some office space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which that could happen in 6 months, right?
Yeah. Who knows?
Well, I will wrap this up. But thank you very much for obviously hanging out and bullshitting about music, because it's fun.
Yeah, totally. It was great.